In 5, 3.
That's tomorrow, and that is it.
In 5, 4.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. And we will leave you with I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it, and we'll do it live. Nick, thing sucks.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do? End of days.
The freedom of speech is being taken away.
What do you think happens to someone after they die? Do you believe in heaven?
I never did. But the whole idea of an afterlife, now I don't know. I have these dreams.
If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed.
And welcome to a brand new life, to a brand new day, all the way from the wastelands of California. My name is Michael, and I look forward to once again serve you those sounds of salvation. First-time listeners, turn on, tune in, and drop out. This is a different kind of show, a place where you don't feel so alone. Let us chase away the light no matter what you at home choose to believe. I do admire you for your curiosity. Live and direct right now on the TuneIn radio app. Search End of Days and you'll find the 24/7 network. Or go to michaeldecon.com for any episode you might have missed. My guest tonight is Michael Aquino. Michael is a Lieutenant Colonel, Psychological Operations, U.S. Army, retired now. He is the founder of the Temple of Set. He is also the author of numerous books, such as the Mind War series, and his latest book, Ghost Rides. Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me into your hearts and into your minds. Here we are again, on a night like this. Welcome back for another dose of the Michael Decon program. Always an honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you to those listening here in America and those who listen outside of America. Thank you for your great support. Hello to those on the live stream right now and, of course, our friends on YouTube. I've got an interesting show for you tonight. Dr. Michael Aquino joins me in moments. If you missed the last program, Jason Jarrell was the guest. What another hectic week it's been. I've had my ups and downs this week, but what's important is that we're all here together again. Like a big, happy, dysfunctional family, we survived yet another week. After the interview on the second half of the show, I've got some emails to answer and, of course, some news to go over. I hope you stick around for that. I'll also be taking your calls on the second half. Now, enough of that. Let's get down to brass tacks and ring up my only guest tonight. See what's going on with him. Michael, is that you?
This is me.
Welcome back to the program, Michael. Always a pleasure to speak to you, sir.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, yes. Now, of course, on our last interview, we, of course, covered quite a bit of ground, and I hope to do that again with you.
All right.
And, of course, the last time you were here, you caused a bit of a backlash with some of the listeners. It seems like lots of people out there still consider you a bit of a boogeyman, Michael.
Well,
yeah.
If you are going to spend most of your life poking into forbidden mysteries, so to speak, then I suppose that's going to raise controversy. Many people have, I suppose, cherished personal images of reality, whether it's religious or political, and they don't like it when you disturb these kinds of things, even if you aren't really doing so or setting out to do so maliciously. But just the fact that you might ruffle some feathers can upset people. They don't like their comfort level distressed.
They really don't. Yeah, they really don't. And of course, I run a bit of a controversial program, people will say, and of course, you're an individual who has been surrounded by controversy for such a long time. And even in our last interview, like I said, it caused a bit of backlash, and I've even inherited some of your most vocal critics as well. I even clashed heads with a few of them on air, Michael.
Well, my answer to critics is pretty much the same these days, that at this point in my life, I've written a total of about 13 books in which I've gone into great detail on a number of subjects of interest to me, much more detail with much more sources and bibliographical references and footnotes than I could ever hope to do in a interview like this. So I suggest to them that if you want to take a poke at me, pick up the book in question in the subject area that's of interest to you, read it, and my goodness, if you find holes in it, have at it. Let me know too, because I'm not interested in deceiving anybody else or myself. Any good scholar will have the same sort of attitude that if he has a proposition or an interpretation of some fact or idea or theory, then he puts it out there and he wishes to know if he's right, and he also wishes to know if he's wrong. If you can't stand criticism, then stay the hell out of the kitchen, all right, because you're going to get it. So my only request is that people do take the time to find out what I actually say and the reasons for it, and then evaluate that.
Understood. Now, how are you, Michael? Are you okay nowadays?
Well, I'm physically, my health is a little on the precarious side. As you know, I went through 2 big cancer operations, and I'm now missing my complete colon and had a lot of my guts rearranged, so to speak. So I'm a little on the shaky side, but I'm not pushing up daisies just yet. And the time spent recuperating has also been a good research time for me to work on things like these books. So when fate hands you a lemon, you make lemonade.
Right. Yeah. In an email, you said you thought it might have been your end of days pretty soon for a moment there, Michael.
Well, I'm still teetering on the edge there, and it was therefore important to me to get to work on these books, make sure that the stuff that I'd learned throughout my time here was recorded, so that if I croak at some point, then my ideas don't necessarily have to croak with me. People can still kick me around after I've left the planet, so to speak, and they'll have the grounds to look at these ideas again. So I don't mind that, and I'm very satisfied that I've taken the time that which I have been on the planet and used it responsibly and productively as best I can. So I don't, I'm not concerned at all about, as I said, leaving before I've done the things important to me to do here.
Yes, and before we get into your background here, I apologize for not doing so. But when I talk to you, usually I'll have notes, but all those notes go right out the window when we talk, Michael.
Sure.
It just seems to happen. And myself, Michael, I've been kind of sick. I've been laying in bed, a bit of a sore throat, and it's caused me to take a little bit of time from doing the program. And I don't know about you, but when I get really sick, I'm laying in bed and I'm hating everything. I'm hating my life. I'm hating the world, basically. And I'm wondering now, Michael, when you are sick, do you feel any sort of way? Do you ever ponder the afterlife?
Well, I've long since realized that the incarnate part of your existence is only a training wheels phase. Many people will have very strong ideas about a quote-unquote afterlife, meaning a quote life after death, which they usually attribute to some mythology or other. But I've gone after the question in a much more methodical way, because I'm not interested again in a mythology or in pipe dreams or in deceiving myself, but I was very interested, still have always been very interested in the thing that is the ultimate self, the ultimate you that is sort of a passenger in your physical body, and how connected it is, how dependent it is upon that physical body. And I've long since come to the conclusion, and had it reinforced by all my further research into this area, that the essential thing that is Michael me or Michael you is simply temporarily using a physical body to realize itself, to define itself against the objective universe's manifestations that are external to it. So it's a way of sort of finding out who you are by bashing yourself physically against the things that you aren't. And that gives you an initial sense of identity. But once you have that identity, then you become less dependent upon your physical body to reinforce it. Then you begin to realize what you really are, which is the metaphysical entity that is Michael, whether you or me. And the more that you understand that, then the less of concern your body is. At this point, I have absolutely no doubt that when this body crumbles around me, that I will continue right on. But I will continue right on in actually a much more integrated sense, a much stronger sense, a sense in which I'm actually freed from the limitations of being buffeted by all the physical senses that the location in this body inflicts. Because as long as you are incarnate in a body, then you are, as I point out in Mind War,
Right.
continuously battered by all the physical senses, which tend to reinforce the notion that you are the sum total of your physical senses. However, researchers such as Dr. John Lilly, who, of course, blazed the trail in terms of sensory deprivation in his isolation tank studies back in the 60s and 70s, who was caricatured in the movie Altered States and the book Altered States, by Patty Chayefsky, shows that your self, your consciousness, not only continues, but is actually much stronger and more integral as the sensory input is removed. You don't collapse. You don't go insane. You don't lose your sense of identity. These things all become stronger. And the ancient Egyptians knew this as well, and they did a great deal of writing and thinking concerning the soul, and actually, or the mind star, as I call it. And they indeed divided it into 8 subdivisions of levels of consciousness that focused on different aspects of your personal existence and self-realization. And those 8 emanations of your mind star, as I like to call it, are all discussed in detail in my book Mind Star, which is sort of a handbook for the human soul, as it were. So I would suggest to people who are concerned about their immortality, don't worry about mythology. You want to look at the actual evidence for this in a very personal sense that you can understand when you're thinking about it yourself. Not whether you're believing some myth cycle, but what, when you look at it and you have something pointed out to you on the printed page as a concept, it'll click right into your head and you'll say, yes, I understand that. I sense that. I'm aware of that. I realize that. That's me. And I've said over and over again that people don't learn a whole lot in my books that they don't already know. They just have it brought to their attention, what they already know.
Right. There's a bit of common sense that goes along with your books, for those who are in tune, that is. And I'm glad you mentioned John Lilly. What were your thoughts and opinions on the whole LSD experiments with dolphins?
Well, I don't remember that he tried LSD with dolphins. I know that he was interested in research concerning dolphin intelligence.
Right.
Because they are known to be the next smartest animal on the planet next to ourselves, and possibly more so. You don't know because they don't talk to us a whole lot. But he was obviously interested in the notion of animal intelligence, animal consciousness, and dolphins were obviously the best prospect to research this. I suppose he could have gone after other primates like chimpanzees and things, but he chose dolphins. That was a rather interesting choice. As far as LSD is concerned, he probably got off on this because he was initially working with isolation tanks, but he kept finding that there was a limit to the isolation tank because people's minds were so very strongly entrained to their senses that they tended to try to clutch to them even in the confines of an isolation tank. So they would become frightened. They would sort of try to imagine their physical senses again and reconstruct themselves to that. So he was looking for something that would let go, that would sort of let people float away from the trap of the physical sense dependency and allow their mind to sort of fly free. And from what he had read of the initial experiments of people like Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert, and so on, he thought that perhaps LSD was this kind of a releasing device. Same thing with Castagna and the Mexican mushroom experience and so on, that's used as a substitute for this in altered states. So he experimented in his book, The Deep Self. He recounts his experiments with using both the isolation tank and LSD at the same time. He found he didn't really need it himself because he wasn't really subject to this clutching effort to sort of cling to the physical sensory impressions. But he did find that for at least some subjects, it was a help that way. In the movie of Altered States, you find that the John Lilly character there, Dr. Edward Jessup, is sort of taken down a horror movie path where he regresses to a sort of a primitive caveman and then back to a sort of a protoplasm. That's sort of unfortunate, but the movie had to be put together as a horror movie, for the sake of audiences, really. And I guess that's the way they chose to do it. But that isn't really what Lilly found with it. This is really a fascinating area of exploration. You're going into the mysteries of your soul. That's probably the greatest adventure that you possibly can undertake. That's the real big question of who exactly, you are, really, not just what your physical person is, but who the thing that's the ultimate you is when you cut away all the externalities, all the clothing, the cars, the living conditions, the monetary levels, the other attachments and things like this. When you strip away everything and get to the thing that's the ultimate you, those 8 emanations of the mind star that the Egyptians identified, it's absolutely fascinating.
It truly is. Truly is. Now, Michael, I am a bit amazed that there's a new group of listeners out there who don't quite know who you are. So I figured we could sort of go over your background just a bit here for a few.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's go back in time. You had a pretty normal upbringing, right?
Yes. I was what you might call an Eisenhower kid. I sort of grew up in the cultural, socio-cultural climate that you see in a movie like Pleasantville in the 1950s. I had a very happy personal family life. I was an only child. My father was an investment broker. My mother was unemployed, but a very skilled professional artist and writer, and very much involved with a variety of positive social activities. She was one of the people who helped found the Pacifica Foundation and KPFA Radio out here, and KPFK down in Los Angeles, and was an accomplished sculptor, poet, painter, things. There's one of her books of childhood poetry that I edited called Pegasus and Pin Feathers that people can even today find on Amazon. She was quite a smart cookie. She had an IQ of about 187, was written up in Ripley's Believe It or Not, was one of the special group of what they called Terman children, studied by Stanford psychologist Louis Terman, Professor Terman, who was looking for genius children to keep track of throughout their lives and so on. My father was a high school graduate. My mother, by the way, went through Stanford in 3 years, just sort of setting that on fire. My father was a high school graduate, an Italian immigrant as a child. He grew up with a family in Portland, Oregon. His father immigrated from Italy during the Mussolini era to get away from fascism, and started up a barber shop, on the waterfront in Portland, Oregon. And my father went through high school in Portland, later on became a a seaman on the merchant ships that went up and down the West Coast, and one stop in San Francisco, I guess he ran into my mother, and it was one of those Lady and the Tramp things, you know.
Ah, I see.
Which is just why I'm here.
Nice.
So I was brought up, my father, by the way, was a Roman Catholic, but an Italian Roman Catholic, which is a very casual kind of thing. Roman Catholicism in Italy is a social and a community thing rather than some sort of a fanatic thing. So Italians take it with interest, but don't tend to get obsessed with it. My mother was never really interested in conventional religion one way or the other. When it came time to get married to Dad, she figured that she should probably do it in some kind of a Christian ceremony. So she looked around to see if she could find a Christian church that didn't bother her intellectually, and she finally settled on the Swedenborgians, which is a very ecologically oriented sort of arts and crafts kind of version of Christianity, sort of very earth-oriented, very, as I said, very Frank Lloyd Wright kind of thing. They have beautiful crafted churches here that are very earth sympathetic. And so she became a Swedenborgian long enough to get married anyway, and they were married in the Swedenborgian church. They didn't bring me up in any particular religion. They just let me, exposed me to a variety of different Christian sects and so on to see if any of them took. I wasn't really interested in any of them. I sort of tossed that off about the same time I lost interest in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. And by the time I was in college, I would call myself a sort of a casual existentialist, meaning that I wasn't really passionately gripped by any philosophy or religion one way or the other. And I sort of took things on a sort of a casual, mature, take it as it comes, rational basis.
One second, Michael. I'm trying to envision you, what you must have been like in high school and college. Were you a quiet type of kid? You kept to yourself? What were you like?
I probably was. I had a lot of interest in the Boy Scouts of America. I went through and got my Eagle Scout badge and was inducted into the Honor Camping Society, the Order of the Arrow, and ultimately recognized to their highest national honor, the Vigil Honor. And I was also national commander, elected national commander of the Eagle Scout Honor Society, which gives you an indication of my level of interest in that, in scouting. And other than that, when I went through high school, I spent most of my time just sort of studying, because I wanted to get into a good university.
Right.
And at the same time, I became interested in high school ROTC, which they had at Santa Barbara High School, and wound up by my senior year as the cadet colonel in charge of the whole school battalion there. So I was pretty successful at that. I received a nomination to West Point because I was thinking of a military career. And I also had an Army ROTC scholarship to the University of California. And after taking a look at both West Point and UC Santa Barbara, I decided on UC Santa Barbara. So I went through that as an undergraduate, took a BA in political science in 1968, and then went on to active duty as an Army officer. I immediately volunteered for Special Forces and for psychological operations and for service in Vietnam. So as soon as I was in the Army, they started throwing me out of airplanes and sent me to PSYOP and Special Forces schools, and then sent me in 1969 over to Southeast Asia, where I was for the next year. And came back in 1970. At around 1969, incidentally, is when I first discovered and then joined the Church of Satan. not for reasons of hating any other religion, but
Right.
because I was very positively impressed by Anton LaVey, who approached Satanism as a sort of a commentary and a critique of what he felt to be moral defects of conventional religion in society. He was very much an advocate of anti-hypocrisy, of personal honesty, of taking responsibility for yourself instead of blaming it on other factors. And all those were things that I liked. He was a person with a great sense of humor. He also had a liking for spookiness and old monster movies and things like this, and so did I. People sometimes say, well, what did you read as a kid? Well, I grew up on Mad Magazine and Famous Monsters of Filmland. So if you put those two together, you get me.
Good stuff, yes. And when you joined the Church of Satan, what did Dad think?
Well, my parents had met Anton LaVey. They liked him as an individual. They didn't think he was a phony or a jerk or anything, but they were somewhat concerned because they said, no matter how good this guy is, and you may know him as a person, joining an institution with a name like Church of Satan is going to put a stamp on you that may cause you troubles later in life. So just be sure that you think that this means enough to you so that you're willing to put up with that. And that was good common sense. I mean, I appreciated the practicality of it, but the more I thought of it, the more I decided that the moral and metaphysical interests and explorations of the Church of Satan did mean that much to me. So that I decided, well, okay, I'll just, take a shot at this and see what happens. And so by the time I came back from Vietnam in 1970, I was also ordained to the Satanic priesthood. I was then assigned to Fort Knox, Kentucky until 1972, where I worked for Brigadier General George Patton, the son of the old blood and guts of World War II. And at that time, I was also head of the Church of Satan's grotto in Louisville, Kentucky, which caused quite a local sensation. And then after 1972, I resigned the regular Army, went back to being a reserve officer because I wanted to go back into graduate school, and I had the GI Bill to work with. So I took a part-time job at UC Santa Barbara and did my master's and my PhD in political science there. And then after that, I had the opportunity to go back into the Army again as an active duty reserve officer. So I did that until 1990. That sort of gives you a rough career progression.
Right. And can we talk about your time in Vietnam?
Sure. I went over.
Yeah, what was that like for you?
At that point, as I said, I was a political scientist. I felt very strongly that I was interested in I had already been, as I said, through the resident course of psychological operations, or PSYOP,
right,
at Fort Bragg. And I was very interested in that because I had discovered it as an ROTC cadet at UCSB and had actually taken the non-resident correspondence course while I was still a cadet. I was interested because it was a way of winning battles and wars without shooting anybody or bombing them. And I liked that idea. It said the way to win things is to argue the other side into cooperating with you, so to speak. And of course, the usual interpretation of that is propaganda. And that's what we relied upon mostly in that kind of a battlefield environment. So when I went to Vietnam, I was assigned to the PSYOP group that we had over there at the time, the 4th Psychological Operations Group, which handled all of that area of Southeast Asia. And I was particularly assigned as a command and control PSYOP officer in what they called 3 Corps Tactical Zone, which was the area of the country, the quarter of the country around Saigon and over to the Cambodian border. So I spent most of my year there, and a lot of it was either with the Air Force or with various civilian agencies that were functioning in the country. also with some American units and, of course, Special Forces units that were there, and of course with the Vietnamese and the Montagnards. So my experience was actually not too terribly different from that of Captain Willard in Apocalypse Now, who was sort of an individual captain. At that time, I was a captain in rank at the same time, who went off on specific individual assignments to take care of hard to take care of situations. So as often as not, I was either in a helicopter or on foot or in a truck driving myself around the country all by myself, in and out of villages which might or might not have been Viet Cong controlled, simply because that was the way to get to talk to people and to figure out where I could do some good. So that was the way that I went at my year over there. And when I came back, I had received the Bronze Star and the Air Medal, for both ground operations and air operations, the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry from the Vietnamese government, and so on.
Yes, and can we talk a little bit about Operation Wandering Soul? I've always been quite curious to pick your brain on that.
Sure. Wandering Soul is, or Rubber Soul, as we sometimes joked about it, after the Beatles album. But Wandering Soul is a very interesting, one of a number of interesting propaganda tapes that we worked up while I was over there. And if your audience is curious, they can Google Wandering Soul on the internet, and they can find sound clips of it so that they can actually listen to it.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of it was that we were trying to figure out, ways to make the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong soldiers surrender or put down their arms or come over to our other side or the South Vietnamese side. And we knew that there was a strong animistic and also Buddhist element within the both the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. It was primarily the South Vietnamese who had Catholicism there, but so we weren't too worried about the impacts on them. But we decided to devise a tape that professed to be the soul of an enemy soldier who had been killed in combat and had been left on the battlefield. And there's a very strong fear of being left unburied, among the Vietnamese, the Buddhists, and the animists. So if they had to leave the battlefield in a hurry because a lot of Southern troops or American troops were coming in massive reinforcements, they were not very happy about that. And this audio tape then purported to be the soul of a killed enemy soldier who was now doomed to wander eternally through the Buddhist afterworld and deal with all these monsters and demons and things that were there. So he was crying out and shrieking and generally very unhappy with his situation. And we would take this, we created the tape down at the laboratory of the Joint U.S. Public Affairs Office, or JUSPAO, in Saigon, which was the civilian oversight of the 4th PSYOP group. JUSPAO was sort of a joint operation of the U.S. State Department and the CIA, and they had all the fancy laboratories and things that we needed to do this down there. So put together the soundtrack and put this thing on a cassette tape, and we'd take it up in a helicopter during sheet lightning storms at night over there and fly over enemy areas and then just broadcast this thing over these loudspeakers down from a height that was so high up that you couldn't hear the rotor blades, but you could hear this voice coming out of these lightning storms at night, and it was pretty creepy.
It sounds
so
creepy.
We had quite a few. We indeed had quite a few people surrender and come over to our side saying they didn't pay any attention to the stupid American propaganda, but they'd heard one of their fellows talking to them from the afterworld, and that freaked them out. So now
were. Yeah, it's like who comes up with this? My goodness. That
So
is
that was
awful.
Wandering Soul. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And again, it didn't physically hurt anybody, but it did scare people. And the whole idea, as I said, was to get people to lay down their weapons and come on over to the side that we were supporting. So that was the story of Wandering Soul.
Very interesting stuff there. When you were in Vietnam, did you also write the Diabolicon there?
Yes. In my leisure time, which wasn't a whole lot, one of the things that I had taken with me was a copy of John Milton's Paradise Lost. At that time, I was sort of interested in the classical, you might say, history of Satanism. And Paradise Lost is one of the great epics, of course, by John Milton. And I was fascinated with it, as I would be any classical work, but I also thought that it was obviously sort of slanted towards a Judeo-Christian interpretation of events that might not necessarily be the same if it were looked at from the standpoint of Satan and his angels. So I decided that I might try to write a sort of a contrasting story to Paradise Lost, called the Diabolicon, which I did. And it took me several months to get it right because it was basically covered the same ground as Paradise Lost, but from the point of view of Satan and various demons that he was associated with at that time. When I got it all done, then I sent it off to Anton LaVey in San Francisco and said, a little present from the combat zone here. And he sent back his appreciation and said he liked it a great deal and was going to incorporate it into Church of Satan rituals and workings there where appropriate. So I thought that was very nice. Chapter 2 of it was written by Beelzebub, and I guess he didn't like the first version because when I got Chapter 2 done, the next day when I was out in the field near Lai Khe in 3 Corps, there was a North Vietnamese rocket attack, and one of the rockets hit my hooch and blew the Book of Belial, or Beelzebub, or whatever, all to pieces, so I had to start all over and redo that one.
Wow. I'm sure that freaked you out.
Well, I just figured he didn't like it, so I better redo it.
Hilarious. So you come back to America safe and sound, and what happens next?
Well, the Vietnam War, and I was all over Southeast Asia, not just in Vietnam. It was quite an eye-opener in terms of what the world outside of Pleasantville, United States was like, because we're a very privileged and insulated country here. And after World War II, of course, the United States was in an economic situation where it was pretty much predatory on the rest of the world in terms of economic relationships. So all of us in the United States lived and still live in a sort of an economic cocoon, where we're much more comfortable than a lot of the rest of the planet.
Right.
So a year in Southeast Asia showed me just how dire and how desperate people outside this cocoon can be through no fault of their own, and the kinds of stresses, that move them. So I came home much more sobered. It wasn't so much a question of being, pro or anti-war per se, although I always had a great hatred of war in terms of being sort of a mindless, destructive thing. That's why I became, as I mentioned earlier, interested in PSYOP.
Right.
But after a year in Southeast Asia and of seeing this up close and of seeing a lot of people killed right in front of me and participating, in firefights and things, I really developed a hatred of this whole concept of violent war, or as I would later call it, physical war, and resolved that if at some point I could do something about it, I would take that opportunity. One of the reasons I went back to graduate school in political science, of course, was to beef up my knowledge level and credentials in that field, to see if the realm of politics and government held some solutions there, or at least had some doors open, towards solutions. So that was one of the reasons I went there. And from when I went back into the Army in 1980, I was also assigned in San Francisco at that time as the USAR advisor to the Presidio headquarters in the city. And I used that time also as I took on an adjunct professorship at Golden Gate University in the city and taught political science there for 6 years. And during that time, honed, my expertise in the subject, and also was very, very interested in the feedback that I would get from my students as to whether or not I was in a productive dialogue with them, because I'm not one of those people that likes to just teach something that you have to memorize and then spout back. I wanted to see if I could awaken interest and understanding in people that they would take with them.
Certainly, yeah.
And use in their lives. So that was my goal, and that was, the way I went at being a professor. And generally, my feeling was that I had a very great time with all the students that I had the whole time. I mean, we were like a sort of a coffee house together, you might say, every time the classes and the seminars would get together, where we all just took the subject of the moment and then just chewed it up and, kind of batted it around amongst ourselves until we had a kind of a joint understanding on it. So I thought that was just great. I sort of took as a model some of the best professors that I'd had and tried to emulate them, and tried not to emulate the professors who've been jerks.
Right. You seem like you would be actually a really good professor. It would be very interesting to actually have you, to face you rather, in a schoolroom setting. That'd be quite interesting.
Oh, it was enormous fun. I taught political philosophy, ancient, medieval, and modern. I taught international relations. I taught American foreign policy and American government, and a class on the United Nations. And my style was that I never used, multiple choice questions or memory tests, because I hate that kind of thing. All my tests were essay, and they were all open book and open note. And I would actually tell the students what the test questions were a week or so in advance. So the control was that you couldn't bring in to the test a pre-written out blue book or something. You would have an opportunity to write for the same amount of time as anybody else, but you could have all your notes. You could have your textbooks with you if you needed to refer to them, because I wasn't testing people's ability to memorize stuff. I was testing their ability to think and communicate. And so they were always essay tests, and then I would take those and I would write a critique. I didn't just give letter grades. I always wrote a critique on each test, which sometimes was as long or longer than the answer that the student put down as to
no, that's funny.
How effective they were. And actually, one of my discoveries at that time was what a terrible job the United States was doing at the secondary school level in teaching kids how to do research and think and write effectively. And I used to spend a couple of initial class sessions with almost every course hammering, research skills and writing skills into students, so that I said, it doesn't do you any good to be smart on something if you can't communicate your ideas effectively. So that was, sort of A1, on the agenda of what I would cover in the curriculum.
Very nice. And of course, during this time, I can imagine there was some sort of issues with Dr. LeVay and yourself, Michael.
Well, we had a great time for the first 10 years of the Church of Satan. We worked very well together. I was basically the next highest initiate to himself in the church. I worked on the national level with him and his wife Diane. And the Church of Satan was evolving, I thought, very well and very nicely, but it also had a lot of growing pains, because some people would try and join it for the wrong reasons. They've been watching too many monster movies, and they thought it was a sex club, or they thought it was mean or nasty, or a way to get even with people, or something like this.
A lot of people still believe that to this day.
Sure, because people would hear the name Satan, and if they didn't know anything else about it, they'd say, oh, this is evil, bad, nasty, so a church dedicated to that must be evil, bad, and nasty. And so it was a little difficult when people would join, and I'd say, well, welcome to a church in which a lot of your materials are coming from the former national commander of the Eagle Scouts, of the Boy Scouts of America, and that I actually joined the church because I thought it was the next step up towards higher morality from the Boy Scouts, and So Anton himself, as I said, he was a man he was an artist really with a great sense of humor. He personally was a high school dropout, but he was very intelligent and very actively self-educated. So he didn't suffer from being a doofus at all. He had a huge library and was constantly working to improve himself. He held himself to a very high standard. But in 1975, there was a crisis because for reasons which I think were probably mostly economic, because the Church of Satan didn't pay as a profession really, and it was always a struggle for him. He decided that he was going to sort of reconfigure it into more of a money-making operation than simply a metaphysical one. And he announced that the satanic initiatory degrees, including the satanic priesthood, were going to be basically up for sale for monetary contributions. A lot of the rest of us in the priesthood thought this was a betrayal of the higher principles of the organization. You know, you don't buy a priesthood. I mean, this is a very high metaphysical calling. And so we left, and instead we founded the Temple of Set. And the Church of Satan basically disintegrated as a genuine religion at that time, although Anton continued to use it until the end of his life as a personal, business and sort of money-making device. But it was a very, very shocking and sad separation for myself and a lot of us, because Anton had always been, as I said, the champion of anti-hypocrisy, and then suddenly he was taking what we thought was a sort of a hypocritical switch, at this point, and selling out, and we were very unhappy with that. So it was not a happy time at all.
Yeah, that must have been a pretty big, right. It must have been a pretty big blow for you to see someone that you respected, and obviously you cared for him, and to see him take, and to see him take this route. I loved him and Diane like my own parents. I would have taken a bullet for him, and he was just a nice guy, and his wife Diane is a wonderful lady. I mean, we're not talking about a couple of con artists or jerks or people like that. We're talking about some really sweet people. And it was very, very distressing to have things sort of collapsing, as I said, down like that. And also, as you can imagine, we had, although the Church of Satan had been discussing itself and handling its public relations for the previous decade, we still kept running into this problem that in the mythology of Judeo-Christianity, Satan is the bad guy by definition. God's a good guy, Jesus is a good guy, Satan's the bad guy, and I don't care how you want to slice and dice the pie, it sort of is prefixed that way. So as hard as we tried to portray Satanism in a positive light, it was always an uphill struggle. And one of the reasons that it was an uphill struggle was because we were sort of trapped in this Judeo-Christian iconography, this symbolism. So that's one of the reasons that in 1975 we just jettisoned the whole history of Judeo-Christianity and went back to find the previous center of this same principle of personal consciousness, and we found it in ancient Egypt in the person of the Neter, or god Set, hence the Temple of Set, which has nothing whatever to do with any aspect of Judeo-Christianity. Right, and do you believe if Anton LaVey was still alive, your differences could have been settled by now?
I'd always hoped that they could be all the way along. When I wrote my huge 2-volume work called The Church of Satan, in which I sought to memorialize and capture sort of the best history of the entire concept and organization, and of course of himself personally. I went through 8 editions of it over the years since 1982, and every time I would do another edition, the first thing I'd do would be to send a copy to him, to Diane, and say, anything in here that you think is unfair, inaccurate, biased or otherwise shouldn't be here, please, feel welcome to let me know, and, let's talk about it and so on. And I never received any response, whatever, from either of them on that, but at least I made the gesture. I never had any interest in in hating, either of them or whatever. As I said, I felt nothing but unhappiness about the situation. So the continued estrangement was just a decision that he, had decided to continue instead of me. I can't do anything about that, but there was no point in trying to force myself, on them if they weren't receptive.
Yes. His passing must have upset you then.
Well, he had I think from what I heard, he had a pretty unhappy time of it after 1975. The thing that had really energized him, as I said, this wonderful artistic morality and higher vision that he had before then, was just gone. And after that, he lived in a world of escapism and nostalgia for 1940s noir films and things like that. And he just sort of went on that way until he finally got ill and passed away. So I just don't think he had a very happy time of it. Later on, in the late 80s, Diane, his wife, had sort of had enough of this and separated from him, and there was a very acrimonious palimony suit, which also resulted in the bankruptcy of the filing for bankruptcy of the Church of Satan. So it was as I said, a pretty unhappy, pretty sordid mess that I watched from the sidelines, and I wasn't very happy about any of it. But again, there's nothing to be done about it.
Oh yes. Now I was curious what your opinion is rather on the beliefs of the Muslim religion. Any thoughts and opinions there?
Well, Islam is another spin-off of Judaism, like Christianity is. If you're going to throw Judaism in the trash can, then you throw Islam and Christianity in the trash can along with it. These things, if you go back into the history of these things, of course, what we know today as Judaism actually began, way back in antiquity as one of a number of Canaanite gods. There was a whole bunch of them at that time in ancient Canaan. People like Baal and Marduk and Moloch, and another one of them, a particularly nasty one, was a god called El, E-L. And one particular group of the various wandering vagabonds that made up the different Canaanite tribes at that time decided to pick El as their personal totem god, and that was the god that was later renamed by that group as it solidified into the ancient nation of Israel and Judah as YHVH or Jehovah. You'll still find the vestiges of that in words like Elohim, the personages of El, or the person of El. So El is the ancient god that they chose from that bunch of Canaanite ones. And as I said, they could have picked some nice one, but they picked a rather nasty and vicious one, which is why the image of God with a capital G that you see in modern day Judaism is he's such a jerk, so jealous, so vicious, and basically malicious slave driver. So if you look at it that way, and you say, well, this was something artificial that the ancient Hebrews decided to settle on, then if there's no point to it other than that they just took some old animistic, nasty god, then to heck with it, dump it. And the same thing goes for anything derived from it. So if this same god became the basis of Christianity or of Islam or of any other spin-off variation, whether it's the Mormons or Rosicrucianism or anything else like that, throw it in the trash can. So we don't have a hatred. I don't have a hatred of Islam or Christianity. I just think they're based on a bad premise, just like because if Judaism is a bad premise, then they're a bad premise.
I agree with you on that one. And going back to, of course, darker times, I'm referring back to the Presidio daycare scandal that broke out. And of course, your name, for many people in the conspiracy world, your name seems to be brought up quite a bit, Michael.
Well, that's actually, I think that it's only the lunatic fringe really that brings it up anymore, because what happened, this country and this civilization over here goes through various scares when it has witch hunts. In the time of World War II, it was Nazis, and Japs. And then after the war, it became commies, and the Red Scare of the 50s.
Right.
And then after the fall of communism in 1989, it became, we have to find something else to hate. We have to find another enemy, another conspiracy. So in the early 80s, when communism was beginning to fail as a bugbear, suddenly it became Satanists, and occultists. And of course, the way to scare people the most is they're after the kids. Okay. This all started with a book that was later revealed to be a complete fraud called Michelle Remembers, published in around 1980, in which some Canadian psychiatrist said that his wife, under hypnosis, had recalled being mangled, by the Church of Satan when she was a kid. Well, we never had any Church of Satan in Canada, in Montreal or whatever it is there. And of course, the whole book was complete nonsense, but it put the idea into people's heads, just like the first person who hijacked an airliner and had it flown to Cuba started a whole lot of other kooks hijacking airliners. So suddenly you had people running around the country saying, oh, I was abused as a kid. I have recovered memories. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, in reality, the human memory doesn't work that way. You don't have recovered memories. I mean, as I go into in my book, Mind War, which analyzes the functioning of the human brain, the memory part of your brain, it might have parts where things are less, you pay less attention to them. Like you forget what you learned in algebra class in high school or something. But the memory part of it for your experiences doesn't go away and doesn't get suppressed at all. That's not the way memory functions. It's always right there. If you call back any experience in your life that's particularly unpleasant, you can pull it right up again, whether it was a teacher that you particularly didn't like, or if your dad spanked you a lot or something like this. You don't have to go searching for it. You know that darn well. So the whole premise, was bogus from the start, but it was exciting and it was thrilling and it was kind of like a Hollywood monster movie. And also, it gave people an opportunity to get headlines, make themselves important, and maybe make a lot of money. So suddenly there were people howling about repressive satanic daycare centers and schools and things like that. And there were scores and scores of these things around the country during the decade. I never paid a whole lot of attention to this originally because I thought it was just a crazy fad that would basically wear itself out. But as it turned out, there was a lot of these scare things going on in the military too. There had been about 20 or 30 accusations about military schools and daycare centers on Army bases and Air Force and so on. And in 1986, I think it was, a number of parents on the Presidio decided to attack a daycare teacher there named Gary Hambright, who was one of the daycare teachers there, despite the fact that he was always surrounded by lots of other teachers at the daycare center, and that for years and years and years, including with the kids who the parents would later allege things about, nothing had ever happened to the kids to make them complain about anything. And none of the other teachers had ever seen any improper conduct and stuff. And Gary Hambright was a Baptist teacher, kind of a mild-mannered guy from what I later understood about him. Suddenly, everybody was making accusations about him, except in my case, a Presidio Christian chaplain by the name of Adams Thompson, who waited a year and then decided with his wife that they were going to make an accusation against me and my wife, since I'd been assigned to the Presidio up to 1986. 1986 to 87, I was actually reassigned to Washington, D.C., where I was a full-time resident student at the National Defense University, which is where the country picks its generals from. So I wasn't even there at the Presidio when all this was going on, but that made no difference. Accused anyway. Well, maybe he flew over here to abuse kids or something, And the chaplain's accusations of kidnapping his daughter for terrible satanic sexual abuse things at our home was investigated by the FBI, the San Francisco Police Department, and they quickly realized by checking my attendance records in Washington, D.C., everything else, that this was a physical impossibility, because I was always recorded being present in class, and at the same time as the Adams Thompson kid was at the daycare center. The child in question was examined by the Presidio Hospital and found to be a virgin with no signs whatever of any molestation. The records of the kid's psychiatrist who had been proclaiming this turned out to be just nothing but coaching from the psychiatrist and so on. So the whole thing fizzled out, and the chaplain who had, together with his wife, had immediately put in a claim against the government for $3 million, didn't get it. So his scam came to nothing, and it was exposed. And for anybody who's curious, they can look up a book of mine called Extreme Prejudice, in which it's a huge book because I got all the information down there. I wanted to make sure that everything was out in the open on this, where I detailed the entire scam. And of course, also along the way, the history of the whole atmosphere around the country during the witch hunt generally. So there had never been any hint of any scandal or anything concerning myself or my wife before the Adams Thompson scam. But then, because it got such sensationalism, oh my God, he's a Satanist. He's also a PSYOP officer. God, you can't get any scarier than that.
Yes.
So then all kinds of people came out of the woodworks. Well, my kid was sexually abused by him too. So was mine. He was up there at the Bohemian Grove, leading the Archbishop of Los Angeles and various state senators and things in mass murders of kids, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it was completely nuts. I think David Icke decided that I was also a half reptile from the planet Venus, and anyway.
Oh boy.
So that basically just started the lunatic fringe going. But everything after the Adams Thompson thing was obviously just a stunt, and to the extent that any law enforcement people took an initial look at it, they just shrugged it off as being nonsense, which it is. There's also the complete historical record of the Church of Satan as an institution which was very, very anti-child abuse, through its entire history. And that was all documented, from 1966 on all down to 1975, as people can read in my history of it. So believe me, if the membership of the Church of Satan all the way around the country had been involved in harm to children, it would have come up long before the craziness of the 1980s. So that was just a fad. And the reason that it fizzled out as a fad, finally the FBI did a major study on the whole notion of satanic child abuse and just said this whole thing is a crock, and there's never been one verified instance of it anywhere. But the people who were trying to get attention and make money switched to making accusations against parents and close relatives. These were people that they could prove association with and that might have assets that they could get. So suddenly in the 1990s, it switched over to accusations against parents and relatives, and also, interestingly, against Christian churches. The kids that had association with the Catholic Church in particular, of course, was involved in major accusations of child abuse. And to its discredit, a lot of those did prove to have some basis for them. Suddenly you had a lot of Catholic priests showing up as having actually committed this kind of thing. And the Catholic Church is still embroiled in this stuff. The Pope is still having to deal with it even to this day. And lots of priests, were kicked out. First, the church just tried to cover it up and reassign them. Now, more later, they're kicked out, defrocked. Some of them are prosecuted, So, I mean, it's a major thing that was going on. But we never had a single issue of that with any Satanist or Setian. And, of course, certainly not with any satanic priest or Setian priest.
Yes, I was going to mention lots of strange allegations coming from the Catholic Church, which proved to be pretty true, and same with other religions. But the Temple of Set, from my understanding, has not had any of these crimes committed.
Not a peep. And we also have a policy that we do not permit minors at any of our activities, both ritual and non-ritual. And one of the reasons for that is that we do not believe in religious indoctrination of children at all, either in favor of the Setian religion or anything else. We don't attack other religions. We don't promote ours. We think that children should get a good, strong secular education, including in realms like philosophy and society. And then when they're adults, if they want to make decisions on their own concerning a religion, like my mother did, for example, then let them go. I mean, if they want to become Setians, that's fine. If they want to become Catholics, that's fine. It's up to them. But we don't think that you should take any kind of a kid and indoctrinate him into one of these things and say, you have to believe in this or you'll be punished eternally, So that was our attitude, and we've always been very strict on that. So as I said, we don't even allow children present at any of our activities.
That's probably a good thing.
We like it. We're comfortable with it. We think it's a good policy.
Yeah, that way you won't have a bunch of crying kids around.
Well, not just that, but as I said, I think it's unfair to children to indoctrinate them into something like a metaphysical belief system that they really don't have the background and the education and the life experience to critique.
That's true.
In most religions, you're born into it. If you're born into a Christian family or you're born into a Islamic family or a Jewish family, then you're stuck. You're sort of trained into it.
Yeah.
If you rebel against it, you get a lot of family punishment and a lot of social punishment. And in some cases, if you don't toe the line, you're just ostracized and kicked out and disowned by your family and your community and, told that you're a piece of junk.
I've seen that happen.
I think that's a lousy situation. It's unfair to kids. As I said, we in the Temple of Set have always felt that that is child abuse. When you do something like that, you just leave them, let them grow up, and be kids, and don't try to, program their minds into fears and hatreds of things that they can't grapple with on their own. Just let them grow up. Normally and have a good childhood, and then when they get to the point where they start thinking about metaphysical issues and such questions, then let them do that on their own, and then they can ask questions if they want to.
Yes, and I also want to quickly mention that I'm not affiliated to any political party or group, and now is the time where we talk more about current issues going on. And Michael, how would you grade Donald Trump after 13 months on the job now?
Well, I've never been a member of any political party or interest group or PAC or anything my whole life. Sometimes people say, well, that's odd, you're a political scientist. And I said, well, I don't happen to be a Democrat. I don't believe in democracy. I don't believe in republicanism. I don't believe in communism or any other ism. I actually am a Platonist. I believe in the kind of idealistic, morality-based republic that Plato advocated in his dialogue of that name. So I don't advocate any kind of an ism or an ology, in any kind of a political sense. And I've never voted in any election, never contributed any money to any political cause. I feel that my area is to be aware of these things and to critique them knowledgeably as a political scientist, as a professor when I've been doing that, and of course in my books when I've written them. But I don't view myself as a stand in line, Achtung, true believer of anything. So when I look at somebody like Donald Trump, I look at him with the same way that I would look at a John Kennedy or a George Bush or a Jimmy Carter. I just say, okay, here's another guy in the Oval Office who doesn't have, nobody comes into that office with any background, obviously, into it. It's a learn-as-you-go job. And we have some people who've been governors or senators or generals or something, or people from the private sector. Everybody brings a different mix of background to it. And then it's a question of how fast and how well they can work themselves into the job once they're there. And who obviously is, what are their motives and who do they feel that they have to please or are responsible to? So what you have in Donald Trump is not particularly surprising because the United States domestic, political culture has been going to hell for a number of decades now, where a lot of the old social nets and systems that had been worked up during the earlier parts of the 20th century after the Great Depression and so on have been gradually dismantled. The ability of anybody to have a traditional nuclear family now is almost completely evaporated because the average man can't earn enough in a single job to support a family. The wife has to work too. That takes her away from the home. That wrecks the family atmosphere around the kids, who become, latchkey kids and are sort of turned loose on their own much of the time. So the country, we don't have things like maternity leave here. We don't have good medical care. We don't have vacation leave or paternity leave or things like that. We're very much behind a lot of the other advanced Western nations in this stuff. So the United States is a basket case in many ways socially, and it's going to take a lot more than this or that person in the White House to fix it. I think that I haven't really liked any president that we've had in there since Jimmy Carter.
Well, I don't blame you.
And I know that a lot of people thought that Jimmy Carter was a wimp, and they didn't like him, for that sense. But I thought he was a great humanitarian, an honest guy, and not particularly beholden to selfish interest groups. But everybody else that I've seen since John Kennedy, and even John Kennedy had some problems.
Oh yes.
But everybody I've seen since then has been sort of a jerk. I was always thinking to myself, this is the best we can do. Well, no, it isn't. And a lot of people were hoping that Barack Obama was going to be a kind of a new Camelot, a new John Kennedy, and he turned out to be worse than George Bush in many ways. Same old. He just talked prettier and looked nicer, but when push came to shove, he was just as unfeeling and nasty towards ordinary people as George Bush had been. So now you get a big reaction against this, and you get to the point where people are offered a choice between voting for Archie Bunker and Cruella de Vil in the last presidential election. So when you offer them that choice, I don't think, this was one of those presidential elections when the winner was the person who the hatred vote wasn't as great against.
It's almost like
the admiration vote.
Right. It's almost like
there were more people voting who hated Hillary than people who hated Trump. And
right.
That's how the election came out.
My goodness.
So now you got this goofball, Donald Trump in the White House, who didn't expect to win, and I think was completely freaked out to find out that he'd won. He didn't even have a room big enough to have a victory party, and Hillary had bought these huge rooms in New York City, and she bought all these fancy fireworks and everything to celebrate her victory, and suddenly it all collapses in her face. And suddenly we've got Archie Bunker. And Archie Bunker comes into the White House and behaves like Archie Bunker. And, some of the people think that it's kind of cute to have somebody in there who sort of seems to reflect the common man's attitude on things. And yet you're also dealing with somebody who in many ways is a product of big money and old Wall Street ties. So it's not as though you've got just a kind of a clean Archie Bunker there either. You've got a person who has old alliances, who's going to take care of his friends, in big business and stuff.
Right.
We just saw that with the tax package, which delivered, big benefits to the 1% and not a whole lot to everybody else. You've got another scapegoat now. Now we're through with for many years after they wore out Satanists and devil worshippers, they've turned to terrorists and Islamic radicals. And now we've sort of worn that out because everybody's sort of bored with that at this point. So what do we got? Immigrants, illegals.
Oh yes.
We're infected with all these illegal aliens, and suddenly there's a big row about that. Well, I got news for you. We've had tons of illegal aliens in this country since, its whole history.
Yep.
And nobody ever cared about that. And for many years, there wasn't even much of a fuss at the border. They'd come and go, come up here, make some money, take it back to their families in Mexico, come up here, make some more money, take it back there. Nobody got their panties in a bunch about it, and all of a sudden now, people can't sleep about it. So this is the latest witch hunt, which is again an unfortunate one. People don't come to this country to abuse it. They usually come because they couldn't live where they were living because it was scary or dangerous, or they couldn't take care of their family. You and I would do the same thing.
Of course.
So that's the situation that we're going through right now, and it's a very unfortunate one. Hopefully there'll be some pushback on it. But again, the same thing was going on under Obama. As much as Trump has been pushing on this, Obama is still considered to be the deporter in chief, and he set up all these aggressive institutions that Trump is just continuing to work with.
Yes, I still can't believe our choices were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, like you said.
You would think that in a country of this many people, you could find somebody smarter than those two, and yet, I mean, on the left, they came up with Bernie Sanders, and if Bernie Sanders had been the Democratic nominee, he would have won in a heartbeat.
True.
Everybody understands that, but the Democratic establishment wasn't having it, because he was not going to take care of the old people on Wall Street. And Bernie Sanders has his own feet of clay in ways. I mean, he's got 5 houses. He's not some poor kid. So he can talk a great populist and common man line, but he's one of the 1% himself. So it's anybody's guess if when he was in the White House, he would behave a whole lot differently than the Hillary Clintons and the Donald Trumps. It's very hard to, and of course, just because you get somebody in the White House doesn't mean that they're a dictator. They can only do so much, and then there are the other institutions of the government that the bureaucracies and the court system and the Congress and the rest of it that all get in their face if they try to push too hard against things. As we've seen, Obama illegally uses his authority to create something like DACA, which is a congressional power. The president has no power under the Constitution to create something like DACA. And then Trump tries to reverse it, and the court says, no, can't do that. So, this is just a big comic opera, and it would be funny if it weren't for the fact that a lot of people are getting hurt and suffering while these kinds of games are being played. So that makes it not funny. Otherwise, you couldn't make this stuff up. If you'd written a novel about this a few years ago, you couldn't sell it because the publishers would say, unbelievable,
Oh my. Yes, I agree with you on that. And earlier you mentioned JFK. For some people, Trump is our modern day JFK. He, of course, has plenty of scandals going around. Of course, one of those is with Stormy Daniels, the porn star who claimed to have an affair with the president.
Well, a lot of precedents going all the way back to Warren Harding and so on. I mean, George Washington, had mistresses and stuff, and so did Thomas Jefferson.
Nothing new,
certainly. And JFK was a pussy hound. At least he was a pussy hound with good taste. I mean, he got it off with Marilyn Monroe.
That's true.
Whereas, who did Bill Clinton get? Monica Lewinsky. I mean,
that's what we know of.
He didn't have class. If he was going to chase somebody around to the Oval Office desk, at least Jack the Haircut did that. If you're going to hit the sack with Marilyn Monroe, okay, that's cool. And if Trump is going to have an affair with a really good-looking porn star, I mean, why not? Hey. That's better than Monica Lewinsky, right?
That's true.
It sounds like she's in a profession where he's actually abusing somebody's innocence, so to speak. So, if he's a pussy hound, a lot of people, I haven't even looked at this gal's picture, but I assume she's reasonably attractive if she's a porn star.
She's a pretty good looking, older woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there are a lot of men in this country who wish that they had been, under the sheets with her too.
Very true. Very true.
So let's get a little honest about this before everybody starts having these big moral attacks on this.
Oh, yes.
And as I recall, all the people in Congress aren't exactly, Puritans either. So there.
Yes, definitely. Of course, every time I have mentioned this, some people get a little upset with that bit of news. However, What goes on between two people is really none of my business, obviously.
I have it, my wife and I have a motto about this, which is, as long as it's between consenting adults, just don't scare the cats.
That's a good one. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah. And so we were thinking of having some baseball caps and T-shirts made up that just say, just don't scare the cats.
That would probably
and
sell.
Go at that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you think Donald...
You saw the movie... You saw the movie Eyes Wide Shut, where in the middle of it, Tom Cruise winds up in the middle of this, satanic sex party, where everybody's in black robes except for the hookers who are stark naked and everybody's banging everybody else.
Yes.
And I was saying to myself, I can tell you that one of the things that's going to happen after this movie is that people are going to say, damn, I wish I could go to something like that. And it exists. You can look up an outfit on the internet called Castle Events. And it's a European outfit which stages Eyes Wide Shut parties at castles and fancy hotels all around Europe. I don't think it's migrated over here yet, but if you feel like you missed out on the party in the movie, you can find it today.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, well, they asked me at one point if I had any suggestions, and I said, just remember that all the people in the movie who had their clothes off were designer actors, from Chippendales and Playboy. I said, and most rich older people, as soon as they take their clothes off, look pretty scraggly. I said, so before you allow nudity, you want to make sure that people pass an eyeball test or spend enough time at a gym or something like this, so you don't get some real scraggly people. Those are the ones you want to keep robed.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's castleevents.com. I'm booking a trip right now.
There you go.
No, I'm joking. Hilarious. Yeah,
I've never been to any of their events, but they
Interesting.
As I said, they did extend an invitation, and thanks very much. I'll keep it in mind. But right now, I've got enough on my plate, and don't need any more complications.
Michael, you're telling me you never went to one of these parties before?
No, not yet. Anyway,
I feel a little sad that you never experienced a party like that.
Well, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm sort of a sexual prude. I've never had, I've had sex in my entire life with only two people, my former late wife, Janet, and my current wife, Lilith. And that's it.
You're making me sad, Michael.
I'm not a person who's run by his genitals. I think with my big head, not the little one.
Yes.
And that's just the way I am. I mean, I've always thought that sex is the most fun you can have without laughing. And I enjoy it, but it isn't something that I'm obsessed with one way or another. I'm much more interested in sex when it goes together harmoniously with love. That's just the way I am. I'm sort of an old school. I'm not saying I'm a prude as much as I'm a sort of a romantic in that way.
Understood. Yeah, you seem like the romantic type, actually, now that I think about it.
I put all the girls and women that I've met in my life, I tend to put them up on pedestals. I really, really love women, and I admire them. I think they're gorgeous and wonderful. Most of the friendships that I've made over the years, I still have. I'm still in touch with, girlfriends that I knew in high school. And we all just get along great, I mean, as I said, I love the fact that there are two sexes. I think it's wonderful, and I adore women. I don't feel any need to control them, possess them, beat them up, or otherwise damage them or harm them in any way. Quite the contrary. I think we should be nice to them and considerate of them. Since we're the tougher and stronger sex, we should be protective of them.
Yeah.
And I just think it's great. Imagine how awful it would be if there was just one sex. Suppose it was just men. Suppose there were no women. Wouldn't that be awful?
That'd be depressing.
Yeah. God, women are so cool.
Yeah, they are actually.
I've known lots of them, including some who are, movie stars and glamour pusses and things along the year. They're just great.
But would you vote for one?
Sure, if she's smarter than the. I don't vote. I never have.
Oh, then that's true.
Yes. I said, but if I were going to select somebody for an administrative or a political or a company office or something, the Temple of Set, for example, has always had the same initiatory degrees and the same office openings for females as males. We've had, the chief office in the organization is high priest or high priestess, and we've had several high priestesses as well as high priests. we've never put one sex above the other or below the other or anything like that.
Yes, and how is Lilith, by the way? Is she doing good?
Oh, she's fine. She's she just as gorgeous today as she was when I met her in the 1960s, and she's very active, in animal rescue and protective activities, which is one of her passions and interests, and just in great shape. She puts up with me, there's something to be said for that too. We've been together since 1973 or so.
And you both look good together, by the way.
Yeah, well, we enjoy each other. People ask me, who should I marry or this or that. I say, marry your best friend. And if love grows out of that, so much the better. But you'll be a lot happier if you marry your best friend.
Yeah, I think you're about right on that one. And going back to you being a professor, during your time of that, did you ever imagine that one day that people would be shooting each other in a schoolroom so commonly?
No, I don't recall that it happened a whole lot back then. At least not that came to my attention anyway. I think that school shooting is a more recent development.
Yeah, more recent.
And I just don't recall, as I said, that kind of thing came up as an issue a whole lot. The level of violence and gun violence has gone up, quite a bit recently, and unfortunately, it's a little bit like airline hijacking or any other kind of a fad.
True.
One person does it, and the next thing you know, it plants the idea in the heads of a lot of other wackos who decide that that's the way to get famous, get noticed, or otherwise, make their point in history or something. I'm familiar with guns. I understand how they can be used. I'm not a hunter. I'm an animal activist, so I wouldn't think of shooting any kind of an animal. I saw what the damage that guns can do in places like Vietnam and so on. So I'm extremely opposed to their use to kill other people with. Right now, for example, some people, Trump, I think, suggested, well, why don't we start arming teachers with guns? And I was thinking to myself, for goodness sakes, how about tasers, or something like that?
Yeah, that was the next question, actually.
Let's not have a gunfight
in
the school. Let's find some way of neutralizing people with guns that doesn't involve in a combat. You may remember Doonesbury, the old comic strip, in which Gary Trudeau had caricatured Hunter Thompson, the famous journalist who was a gun freak.
Mm-hmm.
And he had at one point, Uncle Duke was testifying in Congress concerning guns on behalf of the NRA as a joke in the comic strip. And Duke was up there talking to the Senate, and he was saying, and finally, senators, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns. And one of the senators said, Mr. Duke, are you aware that the overwhelming amount of gun violence takes place in the home? And Duke said, that's exactly my point, Senator. The senator said, I don't follow you, Mr. Duke. And Duke said, well, look at it this way, Senator. Suppose you came home and your old lady took a shot at you. Wouldn't you want to be in a position to return the fire? So that was Hunter Thompson and Uncle Duke in Doonesbury.
Oh, yes, Hunter S. Thompson, great writer. You made a few movie references earlier. Are you still watching anything recent, or have you given up on Hollywood's original attempt, which is really nothing nowadays? It seems all Hollywood does is recreate what has been done time and time again. It's kind of like the presidential election. You would think with all these great minds, we would come up with something original.
Well, my eyes are starting to go on me because of my age. So it's harder for me to watch things like videos and movies anymore.
Oh, no.
But I intend I can still see reasonably well on a small computer screen that's backlit, so I can continue to handle some text. But videos and things like this are becoming quite difficult. Anyway, my movie, I think the last movie that I saw was probably Indiana Jones #4, because Harrison Ford's an old buddy, and I like the Indiana Jones series, wrote some Indiana Jones stories myself and things, and was very happy to see that nostalgic, reunion movie, so to speak. That ended up with him and Marion getting married at the end of it, because that also gave me a nice warm fuzzy, when I saw that, because I like Harrison Ford and the gal who played Marion too. So
and that was the last movie you saw, Michael?
I think so. The last big series that I saw, which I absolutely adored, was the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I thought that was just wonderful, and I was feeling so sad that J.R.R. Tolkien hadn't lived to be able to see it, because it was just glorious, and wonderful music and things like that. So I've written, some of my books reflect movies that and stories and novels that I've seen that I have a particularly strong feeling for. One of the movies that I sort of imprinted on as a kid was Walt Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And a year or so ago, I decided to write the memoirs of Captain Nemo. So you can go on and you'll find a book called Ode to Esme. Esme was his personal sea lion buddy on the Nautilus. So I decided to write the memoirs of Captain Nemo to show how he had gone through his early life and become finally the Captain Nemo that you meet in the Disney movie. And had a very good time with that book. I've written another book called The Morlandale, which is a sort of a dark parody, you might say, of the events of the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings from the standpoint of Melkor and Sauron, and Pallando the Blue Wizard and so on, and the Witch King. So you see how the events would look from the other side of the fence, a little bit like the Diapolicon,
Right.
John Milton way back when. And I've also, the year after the first Star Wars movie came out, which was originally a standalone film in 1977, I got interested in that storyline, and I started writing some Star Wars material myself, which interested Mr. Science Fiction Forrest J. Ackerman enough so that he serialized a chunk of it in his famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. And it's a book today, a fairly huge one because I kept working on it for several decades, called Fire Force. So it goes off in completely different directions from the official Lucasfilm movies. It just, you'll see some similarities there to the very first movie, but it has no relation to any of the others. But it was just a theme and a context that I thought had a lot of rich potential in it that could be explored. So I went off and did that. I'll give you some idea of my, movie fascinations and interests.
What about TV? Nothing there that incited your interest?
Well, when I was a kid, the most recent book I did was something called Ghost Rides.
Oh yes, Ghost Rides.
Which is, and Ghost Rides is it's as close as I could come to an autobiography. I call it an automobiography because I decided, instead of trying to write a straight autobiography, which would be very complicated, as you can imagine from our discussions here, I decided to pick, I've been a car nut all through my life, and I've always looked for fun cars to have. I could never afford more than one exoticity at one time, but I went through quite a few of them over the years and enjoyed them immensely, so I decided to use those as a kind of a link over the years to different interests and points in my life. I mention this because the very first exotic car that I had back in 1965 was a Lotus Cortina, which was an English Ford Cortina that had been modified by Lotus. And the reason I got interested in that was because I had a giant crush on Emma Peel in The Avengers. And she drove a Lotus Elan, so if she was going to drive a Lotus, then I couldn't have an affair with her, but I could at least drive a car like her. So I was able to find a Lotus Cortina in Santa Barbara and get that. And these stories are all told in Ghost Rides, including some reminiscences concerning my interest in Dark Shadows and my friendship with some of the ladies who were involved with that in the 1960s. And a couple of reviews of material that had been written by both Catherine Leigh Scott, who played Josette, and Lara Parker, who played Angelique. Both of them I just love dearly.
That reminds me. That reminds me. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I always, so when I get along the way, as I said, when I've watched TV and I've gotten fascinated with something, I tend to internalize it and magic it in some way. At one point, there's a chapter there where I mentioned that I for a while I had a white Testarossa, which I was inspired to hunt down. It took me several years to find one that I could afford because of Miami Vice. You know, Sonny Crockett was driving one of those around in Miami Vice. That's a cool car. I want one of those. You know? So I finally managed to get myself a white Testarossa.
Very nice. Yes,
So,
those are some good cars, actually.
And then I've been a James Bond freak over the years. So I've had a DB7 that's recounted in the book there, and later on a Vantage V8, modern one, kind of from the Daniel Craig era, you know, and again, had a great time with these. You know, I said the cars have been close friends of mine over the years. I've loved them just the way I've had close friends with ladies and you know, men friends that I've had over the years.
I was going to mention your eyebrows. It seems like everyone likes to comment on those.
Well,
the women love them.
I was born with them, and if you, as a matter of fact, if you pick up Ghost Rides and you look into it, and you'll find the chapter where I am discussing the fact that Hollywood decided to have some fun with me and caricature me in the Omen movies. And there's a picture of me as a high school ROTC cadet in 1962, right alongside the high school ROTC cadet that they picked to be the kid in Omen 2, where you can see how we were near identical. And you can see the old eyebrows right there. And to people who don't think I was born with them and who think that they could always be photoshopped or something, I say, hey, my grammar school was Town School for Boys in San Francisco, and they have all the old yearbooks for the class of 1960. So you can look me up in all the years ever since I was in kindergarten up through 8th grade, and you'll see the eyebrows there. So be my guest.
Yes. Everyone loves your eyebrows, by the way.
Yeah, well, they keep the rain out, you know.
By the way, you just reminded me, my father had a 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner, and
oh, way cool.
Oh my goodness. I wish he never sold it.
Oh, you know, if there's anything that my generation has really enjoyed living through, it's been the car craze era. I mean, we have seen the best iron, you know, I mean, it's growing out of fashion now because of the antagonism towards fossil fuels and stuff, and also because times are tight and people can't indulge themselves.
Right.
Toys like this as much as they used to. But God, I grew up in the 50s, of course, was the decade of the great land yachts, you know, these things that looked like rolling jukeboxes, these huge, monstrous, wonderful works of art. And I've got a chapter on those, you know, in the book. And then, of course, later on, I lived through the heyday of these things in the 60s and 70s and henceforth. I mean, I had a 1965 Pontiac GTO. Yes.
Oh, my.
All right.
Yes.
I had the national commander of the Boy Scouts, of the Eagle Scouts before me, a fellow by the name of Bob Ballou, picked me up at the San Francisco airport one day, and he had just gotten his brand new 1964 GTO. And I didn't know much about hot cars at that point. I hadn't yet been bitten by the bug. And I said, Bob, what's a GTO? And he says, this. And he goes, wham, you know, on the floor. And 3 deuces all opened up at once, and the car went bang, you know, and my skeleton went right out of the back of my body. And I said, oh, man, you know, or words that, you know, something like that, except that, you know, if we have PG-13 people listening to the phone right now, I can't use the actual thing that I said, but I was hooked right then. So eventually I spent several years with a 65 Pontiac GTO, which I thought was the absolute best year. And of course, some other muscles along the way. I had a Viper, you know, for a while, which was a real pig of a car.
Oh, yeah.
It was a midnight blue, metallic. It looked like the Batmobile.
Nice.
It was wonderful. You know, it passed anything on the highway but a gas station. And,
good times.
You know, so I had an enormous amount of fun with all these, cars along the way. Right now, of course, in my.
Yeah. Well, what do you got right now?
Gentile. I've got a smart car. But it's not just an ordinary smart car. It's the one that was specially modified by Brabus Tuning Company in Germany. So I have a smart Brabus at the present time.
Very interesting. And do you have 1 or 2 cars?
I just have that one myself. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, my wife has a car that she likes, and that's it. So I've never been able to have a huge stable of things. That takes too much money, and you're paying too much to insurance people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I've always managed to have something that I really enjoyed that I felt metaphysical about at any one point in time. I was kind of a big daddy Ed Roth, Mr. Gasser, or you might say Calvin and Hobbes, Spaceman Spiff. That's sort of the way I've always enjoyed these kinds of things.
Very, very nice, Michael. And I'm trying to imagine what it is you do nowadays on a regular basis. Are you someone who wakes up and has coffee and watches the news, or are you someone who drinks coffee and begins to write things down? It seems like there's lots of people who do both, obviously.
Well, I like coffee. Actually, my favorite kind of coffee is an instant coffee called Kava, Kava, because it has the acid removed. It has all the, it has the caffeine in it, but the acid is removed. I first developed an addiction to this stuff back in my graduate school days when I had to sit up all night writing graduate papers for my seminars. The danger with kava is that because it's non-acidic, you can actually drink a lot of it until your blood is about 3/4 caffeine, so that when somebody calls you on the phone and says hello, you scream back at them. So I'm a coffee drinker. I'm also I don't smoke and I don't drink any alcohol. So you might say that's my liquid vice right there is kava. And, as I mentioned, I've not been in really very robust health since the cancer talked it to me. So I don't get out and run around that much, as I used to. I'm pretty much, stuck around, home, but I can still work on the computer, so I've used the time like this to do a lot of the writing for these books and things that I've been working on, and that's kind of where I am right now.
Very nice. Anything new in 2018?
I just finished, I just finished Ghost Rides as a book. I'm sort of taking a breather, and I don't have anything definite. I know there's some things that I have always sort of wanted to do, but never quite got around to it, or didn't have the right inspiration. For example, when I was a kid, I was desperately in love with the original 13 Oz books that Frank Baum wrote. The ones with Ozma and Dorothy and the rest of the gang from Oz. Not the first one, the Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. That you saw in the Judy Garland movie. That was sort of an early, the very first book that he did, and sort of on the primitive side. But the later ones, which were very sort of in the Art Nouveau kind of spirit, with a lot of beautiful ladies in them that were all sort of Gibson girls and things like this. And as I said, I fell in love with Ozma at that time, and spent a lot of time in those original 13 Oz books. So I always was thinking to myself, a little bit like I did with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Captain Nemo, it would be fun to write an Oz book, but to make it a kind of a sophisticated adult Oz book, that isn't just a children's, thing, but a little bit like what Tolkien did for things like fairies and elves and things with his books. He took what were some sort of silly notions, and he made them heroic and epic. So I would sort of like to do that with Oz. I just don't know that I could pull it off. When you're dealing with people like, the Tin Woodman and Scarecrow and Jack Pumpkinhead and the Wogglebug and TikTok, it's pretty hard to make these things into adult characters very easily. But that's one of my possible, ways that I can go.
That'd be interesting. I think you're a good enough writer to pull it off. Very interesting.
Lois has always been after me to write a vampire story. But my problem there is that I wouldn't do it unless I could write something with as much class as the original Dracula by Bram Stoker. My idea of Dracula is like the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was a beautiful romance rather than a horror movie or a sex S&M kind of thing. So if I could do that kind of a vampire story, I might try. Today, when you look at the average things that are being passed off as vampire stories, they're more sort of violent, sadomasochistic sex things, which just not my thing. Okay, not interested.
Yeah, I hear you. I wonder if there's ever going to be a movie made about you. I have a feeling that there might be one day.
Well, as I said, Hollywood took a funny shot at me when it made the second and third Omen movies, you might say, when it picked actors who were basically my doubles, for that. Although they didn't consult me on the plots. I don't know. I don't know that I would make an interesting movie because so much of what I'm interested in is kind of on the cerebral side rather than on the dramatic side. You could do something a lot easier with somebody like Anton LaVey because he was a showman and a public artist, not just a thinker and a dialectician, so to speak.
Oh yes. Now we are coming.
I've been involved in a lot of interesting stuff over the years, in government and special operations and stuff like this. But it all gets so complicated that it would be very hard to put it all together in a movie, which is why I didn't even try to write an autobiography unless I hung it together with cars. The time I spent, I was one of the Army's first space officers. How am I going to add that into the mix?
I think there's room for everything. I think somebody's going to get it done eventually. And Michael, I do want to thank you for being a part of the program. I could talk to you all night. So I definitely will have to book you again, and we'll talk more about more of what's going on in current times.
Sure. I'm doing my best, as I said, at least through these books like Find Far and Mind War to at least plant some ideas towards resolving these things positively rather than letting the world just go to hell in a handbasket. And I'm pushing every way I can towards compassion towards animals and the environment, and for that matter, towards other people. So that's about all I can do, and from my somewhat limited influence, but that's kind of where my head is on these things.
And plug your website, Michael.
Well, the best way to look at all the books, which is where people can find out really the most about me, would be to go to Amazon.com and then just do an author search for Michael Aquino, and it'll bring up my authors page, which has a biography of me and then also has all my current books right there with links to them. And that's probably the way to find out the most about me, and in a way that will interest people who are curious.
Very nice. So once again, thank you very much for being a part of the program, and we'll touch base again in the very near future, my friend.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Take care, Michael. We'll speak again.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
You too. Good night.
And that was Dr. Michael Aquino. Great guest, and we'll be right back after this break.
You're going to have to shut up or I'm going to have you arrested.
And welcome back to the program, and I believe someone is already on the line. What's going on, caller?
Mr. Decon, fabulous job this evening.
Thank you for listening, my friend.
I've been listening to you for a while now, and here's what I like about your style, and this is not to, we'll use the term blow smoke, but because I'm sincere. You're very polite, you're very methodical, you're very patient, and what I hear happening is I felt like you were friends, and he was just opening up and really coming from his heart, so to speak, and just being very quite candid with you, which I was pretty amazed.
Yes,
Did I describe that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a pretty good bond together, me and Mr. Aquino. I respect him and he respects me. So we have a very good friendship, I have to believe. And yes, the whole reason behind this interview was to sort of go over some of the negative out there, some of the harsh criticisms he's received over the years. Well, many, many years, that is. And I personally don't feel that he committed some of these things they say he did.
After listening to him, I have to confess that I agree, and I also have to confess that being kind of more of a younger researcher in the sense that I've only been a researcher for about 3 years, that I've learned some lessons that initially some of these rabbit holes that I go into, I guess maybe it's my ego that convinces me to think that I've got it figured out. So I'll jump out of that rabbit hole and go in another rabbit hole. But then as time goes on, I learn more information, and then I realize, wow, maybe I didn't quite read that right.
Yes. No, it makes perfect sense.
I'm guessing a lot of people are possibly making the same error, because I also was wondering, and maybe you would know the answer to this, is so he was with Anton LaVey, obviously, and then he left. and then those incidents occurred, and then he was accused. And I did some reading on the Wikipedia while you were on your break there. But I'm wondering, obviously, if he is being completely sincere, which I'm not going to question, is that he was to some degree set up. And I'm wondering if Anton LaVey, out of jealousy, maybe possibly. Did you ever consider that?
I actually have considered that, but not to a point where I actually sit down and really wonder and go in depth with that premise.
Have you asked him I'm assuming you guys have private conversations prior to the show. Have you ever asked him some of these questions that you didn't have a chance to discuss on the air with him that might reveal some more details that you can share?
Actually, no.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
We're very open with how things are conducted. He has never told me not to ask him certain things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's never done that. He's always been very respectful. And
he was
quite shocking. Quite shocking at times when he, not today, but when he was going through these complications with the surgery, I believe I was the first person he wrote to. And
wow.
He had mentioned that it was almost his end of days, which was kind of funny that he would say that.
Well, I'm guessing, but I haven't researched it. You're the only one that he's really doing these really deep and revealing interviews with on the radio. I mean, I don't know that he's talking to anybody else. Do you know?
He does interviews with others out there, but mostly it's the same stuff that's always kind of touched upon. Yeah. Usually just the negative stuff. None of these other interviews I've heard actually go into some of the things you heard tonight.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
Like the humanitarian side of him.
I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong about that. It's just I don't have too much time to actually go and listen to interviews that he's done. But from what I've been told, he's not exactly that open with others.
You know, what he won me over more so is when he talked about his views and opinions about the president, and then he mentioned Carter, and ironically, I feel the same way, which I thought
that was interesting, right?
Yeah, that was I've heard things that I would not have expected to hear. And then the fact that he obviously it seems as though he has a care for animals. And he stated several times that
he's a romantic. He's a romantic type.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine. Can you imagine for a second going through high school and seeing that guy in your hallway walking around? I mean, I can't even fathom.
Yeah, I wonder, did he kind of dress up and play the role in high school, or have you ever been able to find that out?
No, I don't know. I don't think that happened until much later.
It appears to me that these trigger, I'm just going to use the word trigger because I can't think of a better word, but when he was in the service and he was experiencing I'm going to have to guess death and maiming. I'm sure he witnessed it in the war, and that triggered something in him that maybe caused him to go in the direction that he did, it seems.
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it.
And the other thing I wanted to wonder is that he mentioned Roman Catholic. His father, was it his father that was a Roman Catholic? Is that what he said earlier in the interview?
Mm-hmm. It was his father.
Now I'm wondering if there was any connection to the Jesuits, because that was the first thing that popped in my mind is if his family had any connection to the Jesuits, or it was just strictly Roman Catholic. And I'm guessing you wouldn't obviously ask him on the air, but I'm wondering if he had ever been exposed to, maybe whether directly or indirectly, any kind of abuse, or was he able to slide out of that? Because, as you know, there's so much abuse that's been reported in the Roman Catholic. You even mentioned that in your interview.
True. I don't think he was abused, though.
Yeah.
I think he might have revealed that already, if he was. He's an interesting character, no doubt about it. And I honestly think I think it's only a matter of time before someone makes a movie about him.
Yeah, you know what? I would hope that it would be done in a fair way, but as you know, Hollywood.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he can't get away from all those allegations. I even told
somebody, maybe in the deep state, or I just trying to figure out why he would have been accused, and then there was no evidence. Either he's like the world's greatest liar, or he was flat out, being used as a scapegoat. And I'm just, that's the part. I'd be interested in hearing what his theory would be on that, because he must have an idea why they didn't. I can't imagine this just because, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm just
I hear you. The next time he comes on, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I'll dig further. It seems like every time I talk to him, he reveals more.
Yeah. And the other thing that would be, I mean, I'm sure, I know you hear about it because I've heard your other guests you've had on, and then what his thinking is, because all these reports now, even just in the last few years with, whether it's satanic or not, I don't know, but the reports and the Pizzagate and the child trafficking and, they're eating babies. And I mean, all of it goes on and on and on. And, how he feels about that, and if he believes that's real. These are just things that come into my mind. I'm just planting seeds for the next time. Because I thought it was interesting. It was interesting, the whole thing.
It was a good talk.
Yeah.
It was interesting just to hear, just the regular things about him as well. What he watches. I could already imagine what he watches, but it's hard to picture him, especially when he was like in his, college years, especially.
Mm. He's obviously a highly intelligent man.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
What would be another fun question to ask him is what he thinks about the ET phenomena. He said, did he not say at the end of the interview almost that he was one of the first space, S-P-A-C-E, space captains? Did he say that?
Yeah, he talked about that.
What did he mean by
briefly.
that? I didn't understand what he meant by. What is he talking, like a secret space program, or what do you think?
I think on the very last program I did with him, I think he went over some of that.
Okay. I'll have to go back and listen to that.
Yeah,
one.
just go back and check that out. But of course, it's another black project that we won't really ever get any information out of him about it, I'm pretty sure.
So I'm guessing he still has
yes,
and clearances that he's not allowed to reveal.
Oh yes,
whatever.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't even read all of his accolades here on the air. There's just too many, and as you know, many people out here have ADD. They're gonna cut out real quick if I open just listing all of his accomplishments.
Yeah.
People are gonna be like, oh my God, when is this gonna stop?
Yeah, that's the one thing I've noticed. I don't know how much social media you do, but I'm on it quite a bit, and I see these theories, well, whether they're conspiracy theories or they're realities. Sometimes you just don't know exactly, but some of these stories can get generated, and then before you know it, people are just start posting things without doing any research, and then it's like a snowball, and suddenly what started off as just maybe some ideas and possibilities, suddenly it becomes a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it becomes a fact.
Yeah, and it gets kind of annoying sometimes because I almost need like a social media police. It's like, hey, now, slow down there, fella.
That's the problem with the internet, though.
Yeah, exactly.
You never really know if you're getting accurate information or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the trouble with being alive in 2018. You don't really know who you can actually trust.
Yeah. What's your take on this crisis actors? Because I kind of believe that again, it's without actual evidence sitting here in front of me, but I'm under the impression that there is some truth to that. But do you have any research or theories on what you think that these false flag events?
Hold on. Wait, hold on one moment here. Hold on.
Right.
And I believe Max is also joining us here in this conversation. Max, is that you?
Oh, good evening, gentlemen.
There you are.
What a great conversation you guys are having here.
Yes.
Super,
did you hear his question?
Yes, I did. A part of it, I had a little bit of technical difficulties there.
Yes.
Go ahead and repeat it if you want.
Yeah, he was talking about crisis actors and the whole Valentine's Day massacre that occurred out in Florida.
Right.
And yes, you were asking if I believe that these were crisis actors, correct?
Yeah, or if maybe not all of them. I mean, it certainly appears as though, and I'm only looking at this without evidence or facts, but what appears is that this kid, David Hogg, is, and if you listen to all his interviews and you look at his information, he's just not always consistent. But the point is and I don't know that he's 27 or 25 or went to school in California or he went to school there. I mean, it seems like there's so many reports about the guy. I don't know which one to believe. I don't have the time, quite frankly, to try to figure it out. But his father was in the FBI, and I don't even know if that's true, but let's assuming that his father was in the FBI and did work under these special programs. And I am a firm believer MK Ultra is 100% real, and so it just has the smell of that type of feeling like he was kind of groomed for the position to be the spokesman for this. You know what I mean? That's just my conspiracy thinking mind working right there. But I'm curious what you guys think.
It's a fair thought. That's a fair thought. I don't know 100% for certain if he is a crisis actor, but it is fairly odd given the fact that all the circumstances that you just mentioned are present. It is rather unusual, especially that he, from what I had read and seen, it definitely seems like he's been groomed. Yeah. To a certain degree, right?
Mm-hmm. What about you, Max? What's your take?
Sure, a similar perspective on that. I definitely think that there is some potential grooming there. I'm fascinated by all this stuff. It's quite disturbing to say the least, though. I'll leave it at that. I have a bit more to share regarding that, but I'll leave it at that for now. By the way, I have to say, I have to agree with you. I can't remember your name.
Eric.
Eric.
Oh yeah, this is Eric. I'm sorry about that. I forgot
Eric, the Awakening Man, your newest fan and friend.
Yeah, I share the same sentiment.
I dropped the other guys, and I'm just going to listen to Michael for a while because I like his style.
Yeah, I have to say it was good to really tune in. I had some issues previously, some tech issues, and I couldn't get the show live, and I love listening to it live, but I was obviously catching the YouTube feeds, and this was just to remind me of a classic discussion there, and I was listening from the car, man, and it just sounded so good. Your interview style, the way you make the guests, and I think this is a commonality between really good hosts is you kind of feel like you're in the room with that person, that guest. And that's what it felt like. And it's raining here in Los Angeles. So.
Oh, perfect.
Oh my God. You sounded fantastic, man. I was hearing the rain hit the car window and then, MA.
That's what I always envisioned, that sort of scenarios going on while people listen to the program. For those who are driving around or at work, it's a perfect little setup there.
Oh my God. And Aquino is just a really great discussion there for all the reasons that, Eric, you mentioned it's just one of those situations where you have just a great interview and just a really riveting guest. I mean, he's been on the show before. I always love when he comes on and shares, just a wealth of knowledge. But, some of the funny stuff that he said, it's interesting the stuff that you were able to kind of get him to talk about,
Oh yeah.
He had me cracking up about the being a sexual prude.
I wanted to laugh. I wanted to die. I wanted to die when he said that.
Yeah, he said
a part of me wanted to go further into that. I wanted to ask him about his wife, Lilith. I was going to say, are you still, you're still knocking that out?
I would have given you a real, legit, honest answer.
I was almost going to say it. I was close.
And he would have told you the truth. He probably said, well, I was a few months ago, but I'm a little under the weather at the moment.
He would have told me. He would have told me.
He would have told you.
Yeah.
He would have laughed and then he would have told you.
Yeah, we have that relationship now, I think, where I could kind of say outrageous things and he won't get too offended at all.
Yeah, it was great. It was cool when guests really open up and you get to kind of, peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of doing these kind of interviews with these individuals. It seems like everyone out there always wants to bring in these guests and they want to talk about the same thing they talk about in every other show.
Right. Yeah. That's so true. And he's not run by his genitals.
Oh yeah, that was classic.
The classic car conversation. Learned about a different coffee that I've seen in the stores, but I didn't know that it didn't have the acid in it. So I was intrigued by that entire discussion from the beginning to the end.
That was actually the most educational comment he made all night because I have problems with my stomach because I like coffee and I'm not thinking about the acid. So now, he could have solved my whole acid problem tonight.
Me too. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, most
Kava.
writers.
Was Kava? Is that what it was?
Kava.
Kava. Yep.
Yeah, most writers I know, usually when they wake up, they'll have coffee and then they'll start writing.
Yep.
That's their process.
We've had that convo, actually.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Although late nights, I'm usually under the influence of the exact opposite of coffee.
Yeah, you're up to no good at that hour.
Now, have either of you guys researched the Set, S-E-T, I don't have a tremendous amount of knowledge about
the
Set.
Temple of Set?
Well, the actual, ancient Egyptian God, apparently, according to obviously his beliefs, is this was the God that came to him that said that Satan, that it's not Satan, it's Set. I am the God. And so it seems like that's why he went the direction he did.
Right.
Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right. No, you're right on that.
So who is Set? I mean, have either of you, I'm just wondering if either of you two guys done any background research on Set, because I haven't. So I'm just trying to get some knowledge out of it if you have any.
Yeah, well, that's going to take a long time to explain. They believe that Set is the one real God. And it goes way deeper than just that. I will say one thing though. Someone had emailed me about the Temple of Set, and they were almost like they were trying to recruit me. It was a little odd. No, I know very little of the Temple of Set, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. I've heard a little bit about it, but I'm unfamiliar.
Like I don't know all the inner workings of the Temple of Set. I just know it's, I think you have to pay like $5 or something just to get in. I think I had asked them on the last program about that. But yes.
I'm also curious when they're performing their rituals, and their, whatever the practices are that they're performing, if that is above top secret, or if he could give us some ideas.
Oh no, he could definitely tell you all those things. And matter of fact, I think we even talked about that on the last program, now that I'm thinking about it.
You need to go to the last program, I guess.
Yeah, we covered a little bit more on that note.
Okay, so what's your take? I mean, why do you think people are drawn to these types of, we'll just call them gods, just for the sake of this conversation, and then they understand that there's, through the, occult, black magic, or just the esoteric, whatever you want to refer to it as, that they believe, for whatever reasons, that if they perform these rituals, that they're going to get something as a result from it. And so why do you think people are drawn to that so much? For me, just my personal style is, I don't feel drawn to doing that type of stuff. I'm not religious. I'm not Catholic, Christian. I'm not atheist. I'm just, you know what I mean? I don't understand why people feel the need to get into that.
I understand why people feel the sense to belong to something of this nature. I think that's what you're saying. And I think it might be the same reason why some people are sports fans. Why some people are those hardcore fans that exist in sports. Those are the same people who just cling on to certain things. It's a part of their identity. It's their part of their sense of belonging to something. I think it goes hand in hand with people that get associated to a group like this. Max, would you say that's a fair assumption to make?
That is an interesting assumption to make. It's hard to say. I think it's hard to say. With sports, that's something difficult. I can relate to. With, especially coming from a city that was such a part of the identity of the city, and it's such a big part of my upbringing. So I could see where that would come from, and I could see where that mutual gravitation towards something would be. So I definitely concur on that. It's a fascinating, discussion to have, really. It is.
Yeah.
Now, have you had any guests on, Michael, that have talked about I'll just use the term inner workings of I'll just use the term Illuminati, and of course there's a lot of innuendos that there's different types of quote unquote satanic type practices that are going on in the Hollywood area. And I actually know some people that have told me some stories from their own personal experiences that led me to think that there's some validity to some of these stories that we hear. Have you guys heard any stories or experienced anything or have anything you can share?
Well, actually being out here, yeah, I think that people are exposed to a lot. So you can be influenced by a lot. There's clown parties for goodness sakes. I mean, people worship clowns. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on in Hollywood. And I think in general that you could be gravitated towards, especially when you're dealing with people who have rather addictive personalities. So, absolutely.
What about you, Michael? What have you heard or experienced that you can break out here this evening for us?
I don't think I could share some of those stories, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I'll tell you.
I can't get in trouble with those folks now.
I'll tell you. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Hold on. So you're saying that you have knowledge, but you're just not privy to discuss it live on the air? Is that what you're saying?
You know, there's a lot of things I can't discuss on the air.
You're being serious right now.
I'm being dead serious. There's all kinds of things. Max knows that there's lots of things I can't talk about.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I look forward to having a private conversation sometime, man. Well, I'll tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I was invited to this party. It's called the Omen House. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's right down the street from where the Manson murders occurred.
Yeah.
And this guy, David Omen, lives up there, and it's a haunted house. And anyway, there was a Halloween party up there. Matter of fact, I got invited from the Jimmy Church crew, and we were doing the show. And then after the show, one of the people's there's mother had recently died, so somebody was there, and they got to put a table out, and they were doing like a little seance, and they're trying to summon this person that had died to have some communication with it. And I was standing behind the lady that was kind of conducting the ceremony or seance, whatever you want to call it. And I was looking out the window as I'm listening. It was a sliding glass window, and I had never seen anything that was ghostly like ever in my life until that evening when I saw this light that looked mostly white, but as it moved, it had like maybe some red and blue and orange and green, almost some of the colors of the rainbow, and it went like within a second, but it was so obvious that I wasn't drunk, I wasn't stoned, but I'm just saying whatever I saw, I know what I saw. And there was another lady that was right in front of me that happened to be looking out, and we both at the same time said, "Oh, did you see that?" And nobody else saw it but us too. But anyway, it was interesting because I heard some stories that evening that I was told I can't repeat on the air, but there are some interesting stories. And there was a girl there actually that was that was with this guy who's actually a Hollywood actor. He's done some shows that if I told you, you'd know. But anyway, she was kind of talking to me on the side, telling me what an awful person he was and all these awful things he does. And I'm like, this is strange. I don't even know this woman. Why is she telling me all these things? And then at the end of the night, she says, we should get together and have coffee sometime. And I thought, well, I don't think I want to go there. Just, she was attractive. I thought, I don't want to go there because you're with this guy and you're telling me you're not with this guy. And it just seems too strange. Long story short, she goes, well, I'd like to invite you to one of our Scientology meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we go. And that was my out at that point. I said, no, I'm sorry. I don't participate in any of those kind of activities, so I can't.
It's a good thing you didn't.
Yeah, I've heard some bad shit about we could say shit on your show, can't we?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Anyway, yeah, it's interesting.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks for the call. I do appreciate you, phoning in here.
Right on. Well, thanks for taking my call, and you have a good evening. I'll talk to you in the future, brother.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye.
And there he goes. That was Eric there, ladies and gentlemen. Great guy. Yeah, lots of things that he asked me there. Was stuff I covered on the last interview I did with Mr. Aquino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't even remember some of the rituals that he talked about the last time he was on. Usually I take notes for these interviews I do with Mr. Aquino, but like I mentioned earlier, those go out the window really quickly. It's kind of hard to come up with any really good notes for Michael whenever I have him on.
Right. By the way, I want to say one thing, Michael, too, about Michael. Hopefully he gets better and gets well soon. Sounds like he's had some rough times. I know his progression is sort of manifested as you've been interviewing him, but I want to send him some good wishes.
Yeah, that's nice of you. I think he's doing better.
Yeah. He's in better spirits today than he did the last time.
The last time. He didn't seem too happy, did he?
No, yeah. It's pretty morbid. I was like, damn. But
I noticed that too. He was a little darker the last time, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But he's real. He keeps it real. It's interesting, his backstory, some of the stuff that he's been accused of.
It's pretty horrific.
Yeah.
Some awful things he's been accused of for many, many moons now.
But good discussion, to say the least.
Yeah,
and I have to tell you, just bringing it back to how it sounds in the car, man, and with the rain in the background, and it's It's really just absolutely riveting, like watching a good flick.
Yeah, that's something I've been really trying to emulate for a long time now, that sort of effect on someone. But of course, many people don't listen in their cars, so it's really rare that I get someone to mention that they listen live while driving around. That's pretty interesting.
It's a beautiful thing. It's perfect for the city. I almost feel like it's thrown back in time. If we could go back to the days of those analog, even the microphone. I could see you at, with that old school desk microphone or one of those old, I forget what they call those mics, those hang down that look like a giant.
Oh, yes.
That's just, I can see that. It kind of feels that way, has that feel, especially driving through Los Angeles.
That's awesome.
Oh man.
You know who isn't feeling awesome though is that Heather Locklear.
Uh-oh.
She took a bit of a beating recently. Did you see that?
Yes.
Beat the hell out of her.
Jeez.
Holy crap. For those that don't know, Heather Locklear, she was arrested for alleged domestic abuse, including that she told cops that her boyfriend choked her to the point where she couldn't breathe, if I remember correctly. And that's the Ventura County Sheriff's deputy, who said this sort of thing. I guess police heard arguing coming from their bedroom. And, well, ladies and gentlemen, I gotta say that's pretty normal stuff, the choking. It seems like every woman really enjoys that sort of thing, right?
My God.
The choking, you gotta be careful out there, boys. You might have a lawsuit on your hands.
Well, I don't try that. I'm a brother. So, I can't even try that.
You shouldn't do that, Max. They'll definitely get you on something. They'll be like, he's black.
Exactly.
He's guilty.
Yep, guilty.
Yeah, they're not gonna play games with you. They're just gonna lock you up. They won't even talk to you. Especially out in LA.
Oh no.
Yeah, you don't want to talk to the cops. That's not good.
Hilarious. By the way, have you seen any good movies lately? How's your, have you seen anything that's kind of...
It's funny you say that because I haven't actually been watching anything good. It's all been awful movie after awful movie. One of the last movies I watched was Tremors, okay? Give me a break.
I see.
Tremors.
Yeah.
And by the way, the movie Tremors 4 is coming out. Don't get too excited. As you know, I am a fan of terrible horror movies, and for the past month or two, I've been watching terrible horror movies. And of course, Tremors has always been a movie I've liked since a kid. And
it's back.
The last one I saw had Jamie Kennedy, and I just felt like punching him right in his stupid face.
Oh my God.
I don't know if you feel the same way, but I just felt like punching him. He is awful. I think he just stinks on ice.
A bit interesting to watch. I'll just put it that way. I gotta watch what I say. I'm too close to the source, if you know what I mean.
Oh, really? You're close to people that are in the production team there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, let's just say I'm close to some of the people that
are involved in that abomination.
Indeed.
Oh man, I feel awful.
I know of some people. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, it's no Sharknado.
True.
I tried to get that director on the program, but I don't think he wanted to be on after I had asked him what drugs he was using when he made that.
He responded to that too, didn't he? He said,
I think he said crack, right?
Yeah, or something. Yeah. I thought it'd be shrooms or.
What a weirdo. I'm not sure.
I like shrooms.
Oh, there's, yuck nasty.
Put down shrooms, Max Paul.
Oh no, this has just gotten, this is
hell, the show just got worse.
I know, it's time to hang up, goddammit. What's up,
Well,
you sexy sluts? Thanks for having me to the call.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. How are you? Did you enjoy tonight's program?
I did enjoy tonight's program, man.
Very cool. It was a very interesting guest, and of course you were listening to me and Max talk about awful movies, and I have to go back right again to awful movies and television. I had been pestered on social media about The Walking Dead, and if I've been watching that, and
I've never seen an episode. I've never seen an episode of Walking Dead or Breaking Bad.
Interesting.
I'm not, I try to give The Walking Dead try to give them a bit of a chance. I tried watching where I left off, and I gotta say, I'm just not that interested at all anymore.
Yeah, I haven't watched this season. Don't care. I just don't care about the characters. I'm glad that Glenn died.
Aside from that, the show stinks, and I'm happy that Glenn died, and that's about it.
I played the game The Walking Dead when it first came out on like Xbox 360 or whatever, but and I guess it was based on the whole television show because the little character where it breaks to go into storyline. That's all taken from the movie, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I ever want to watch this. Cool.
I don't blame you for that.
No doubt. What's up with you guys? Max Pole, how are you doing tonight, brother?
Yeah, how is Max?
Just hanging out with you all, Good times.
It's good times. Oh my, everybody get naked. I know your punch phrases, bro. I'm actually asking you, are you okay? How are you doing?
So much abuse from this guy. Michael.
Oh, that was a weird little thing there. I heard you like 5 times in a row there.
Ooh.
Max Cole's got a DJ at his house.
I know. You heard that too, right?
Hell yeah. I
know. Or did you scratch a turntable? What was going on back there?
Weird. I didn't even hear it. That's I don't know.
Ooh, someone's cracking. It might be your microphone there, Max.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're losing you. You hear that buzzing sound?
I do hear that.
That's not good, Max. Is it your mic?
It's not me, man. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the, I like it though. Whatever's playing, whatever's going on back there, a little sound effect action, maybe a little,
It is like a sound effect.
Yeah, it sounds like, too many microphones laying across, electric cords.
That's true. It does sound like that.
Are you on
Very
a Nextel, Max Pole? Get your Nextel away from the speakers. I remember being in a radio station and being like, all right, you Nextel motherfuckers, put them things far away from all the equipment. Cause that, two-way, the chirp, that always fucking interacted and interfered. Wait, fuck you. I said it right the second time. Interfered with, problems.
Oh yes. Gotta keep that away, especially cell phones too. Near a microphone, you want to keep that away.
Trippy.
My bad. What are you guys talking about?
Well, we're talking about all sorts of things here, but yes, before you had
Bachelorette, Max Pole.
Oh, you're asking Max?
So, you have any stories about the Bachelor or Bachelorette?
No, I don't get into that show. I can't. I can't do it.
I know you can't, but I mean,
stay away from the reality. Nah, no shows like that, man. I stay away from that world.
It's not his style.
I know. Ever since I started talking to Max Pole, I can't watch movies without being like, yeah, she fucked her way to get up there.
That's the truth. There's so much of that goes on, though. Man.
Now you know how I feel after I watch a Harvey Weinstein production.
I know.
That's all that goes on in my mind. I'm just wondering who did what.
Dude, not talking to Max Pole, but ever since the Harvey Weinstein and everything came out, I cannot watch a movie, TV show without being like,
Yeah,
I wonder what crazydaysandnights.net is talking about this one.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, dude. Especially ones that have longevity in the game. Not just skin in the game.
Yep.
Got that long skin in the game, Max Pole.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing for the music industry, too.
Oh, yeah, same thing for the Geffen from Geffen Records. Remember him?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, there's a lot of shit, a lot of conspiracy theories tied to, the 2 guys that killed themselves. The 2 lead singers, Soundgarden and the other guy. You know what I'm talking about? Who was the one who killed himself like weeks later?
That, Chester Bennington or whatever his name is?
Yes. And he's from what band?
Linkin Park.
Linkin Park.
That's right.
Awful band.
If you go and look at, crazydays.net, there's a lot of fucking blinds about that shit. About, not Chester's, but God damn it. What's the dude from Soundgarden again? I'm sorry. About his widow and how she's trying to capitalize on everything. And dude, there's a lot of crazy shit. Conspiracy theories that have backing up to it. Let's say
about
that.
Chris Cornell.
Chris Cornell, yes.
Right. Yeah, I had his name in my mind and I just couldn't repeat it. I'm like, what's his face again?
Oh.
Yeah, it is Chris Cornell.
Yeah, dude, there's some fun, shit to dive into when it has to do with them 2 and their suicides last year.
And you think that's legit?
Their suicides?
Well, yeah, I'm just talking about the conspiracy angle.
dude, I never will put my foot on a lot of shit unless I see a lot of fucking, evidence from both sides. I cannot say I think it's legit or not. I'm just telling you there's a lot of theories. There's a lot of, rigmarole about, Chris Cornell getting contacted by kids that have been molested on, or not even kids, but there was a guy that was going to write a book about Geffen and expose him for the pedophile that he is.
Ooh.
And they were going to Chris Cornell about it in the first place, trying to find out, all right, we'll meet up this day. Like, there's emails between this person that got killed and Chris Cornell, who obviously committed suicide, about to meet up. They were going to meet up at a certain place on his tour. And like 5 days before he was, I think I want to say Kansas City, Chris is dead.
Wow.
And it has to do with, Chester Bennington as well. Like, they're all tied into it. And it has to do with child fucking trafficking, Pizzagate and all that stuff. I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
It's very interesting. I just don't have an answer for that. I've seen some of the conspiracies that go on, and very quickly too. As soon as he died, I swear I saw 5 different conspiracy angles just jump out at me. I'm like, whoa. I didn't even have time to read about the first one, and now there's 5 other ones now.
Yeah, dude. My bad. Crazy Days and Nights.net. Max Pohl and I talked about this a bunch of times. This website, it's supposed to be ran by an entertainment lawyer out in Hollywood that's been there since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And he's supposed to be, leaking things out about people, celebrities, and, oh, this person's doing coke. Well, guess who just cheated on him and he can't find a thing and blah, blah, blah. And some of them are revealed. I don't know if the news got out enough where like, all right, well, this is, Justin Bieber and fucking what's her face that just had a kidney transplant that won't stop doing coke. Selena Gomez. Right? And some of them with Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell have been revealed, like Chris Cornell's widow is doing some crazy shit. And it all has ties to do with this. Like, he'll write it's called Blinds. It's like a little, type of, I don't know, this A+ person. It's a paragraph about what it is, but he doesn't reveal any names or nothing. But he reveals enough that you can figure the fuck out what's going on. And if it comes out in the news, he'll repost it, the same blog post, and be like, this is about Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber and Chris Cornell or whatever. I'm just throwing names out there. Again, a lot of them shits have to do with Chris Cornell that makes you want to be like, wow. None of this is in the news. None of this is even on YouTube news with the conspiracy fuckers. I don't know, man. There's a lot of shit going on with Chris Cornell. I'm sorry how I got on topic about this, but goddamn, Max, aren't you working on the back?
That's so funny. No, there's a lot in there. Yeah. I just have no good answer for that though.
Yeah, we can't have answers for that.
I just don't have a good answer for that, but yes.
It's just puzzle.
I did read about that though. It's strange.
Max Pohl!
Yeah, there's Max. I can't even believe he's here.
I know it's nice to hang out with you. I'm telling you. It's been a while since we
it's been a while. I've been sick. I've been out of the game. That happens in life. Sometimes you get sick and then you just begin to hate everything.
Yeah. It's interesting what your mind does when you're sick. Or when you're have been forced to stay in one place for a while.
Yeah, your mind will wander. That's true. It goes all over the damn place, especially when you're sick. Especially when you're sick and laying there and you contemplate everything.
Mm-hmm. And you can't move and you're like, fuck you guys, fuck myself, I hate myself, I hate myself, I hate myself.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I feel fine. Feel about 110% better now. Had to throw that 10% in there.
Hell yeah, man. That's good. Then you're doing more than what you normally do, right?
Right indeed. So, once again, folks, it's been a great time talking to both of you here, and I'm gonna have to cut it pretty soon here. Any last words for you there, Mr. Yuck Nasty?
Man, I love you, and I love Max Pohl, and I love Star, and I love the gay guy that I forget his name.
Where is Star, by the way? I haven't seen her.
Where's she been? Wow.
Yeah, where is she?
She's probably sick.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's getting sick.
It's about that time of year.
Yeah, either you're getting sick or you just got done being sick, like myself. It's an endless cycle of nonsense, really.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so any parting words, my friend?
Man, I love you. I love Max. Max, I love you. You know that.
Man, you know how I feel about you, man.
Oh, yeah, man. Both of you, man, you guys are my friends for fucking life, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. Always fun to catch up with you, my friend.
Hell yeah. Thanks for letting me go nuts on some conspiracy shit all of a sudden.
It's all right. Don't worry. That's what the show's for. You go a little crazy. It's okay.
All right, man. Love it. I love you guys, man. I'll see you guys next week.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Penis.
And there he goes. Yuck Nasty. A very good individual there.
Oh, man.
Love getting an update from him.
Dude.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And Max, once again, I do want to thank you for being a part of the program here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. It was good to call in and hear that cinematic voice of yours there in the car, and it's good to chat it up for a little bit. And what a great show it was tonight, and shout out to Yuck too. You know, I found out about that dude through you, actually. So good dude. Yeah, man, great show. You know, keep up everything that you're doing, man. It's really nice to tune in and listen to you on these Saturday nights, and it's cool that you're doing these shows also on the weekdays, like these sporadic shows there, and giving us some more ear candy. But
yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. By the way, I don't know if I've said this, that the new logo is fantastic too. I needed to shout that out too. It's awesome, to say the least.
Oh yeah, that's a great little piece there. The illustrator that I have, he came up with that entirely himself. I take no credit for that. He just happened to throw it on me one day, and I thought, wow, that's pretty nice. Good little logo there.
Yeah, it reflects the character of the show very, very well. It's compliments you and the work that you're doing, and it's just good to see you doing your thing, man. It's always good to tune in, and it's good to hang out with you as always.
Oh yes, I could talk to you all night, as well as many other people here that appear on this program. All of you have been phenomenal characters in and out of these realms here.
Well, salute to you, sir. Great show, and take it easy.
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good.
Take care.
Peace out.
Bye-bye. And there goes Max Cole. And if you are listening to this on a replay, keep in mind you can listen every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, live on the TuneIn radio app. And if you enjoy this program and want to help fund this project, go to michaeldecon.com and click that donate button. Any amount is fine. Definitely pitch in and help the live stream. This program completely depends on its listeners, and of course that means you sitting there listening. Share this with your family and friends. I'm Michael Decon. Thank you for listening. And with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night, everybody.
Sherry. Right in the hardest part out. I'm not that way. I'm a Christian. Drop out of graduate school. Drop out of
You mentioned the Illuminati, yeah. We won't go into who's behind them, but the Illuminati certainly is part of the whole thing. The top members of the Illuminati are open worshippers.
I could tell that all the mainstream media outlets were giving me like bullshit. Like you can just see it. It's clear.
How appropriate. I wish I could be in that ring with Hogan right now.
It's crazy.
I had no idea this shit existed before 726.
Oh, Grammy. I like Grammy. I'm gonna keep it real.
A lot of good content. A lot of cool topics. You know, I feel, fortunate to have an opportunity to speak to the
Yeah, Mr. Rusev. That shit, I like that, man.
It's the simplest shit. You go in there, you see the bartender, you say, hey, don't put up your smoke, don't put up. You know, you can start about midnight. That's what I want.
Just for what it's worth, I want to put in my 2 cents to tell you that the most incredibly well-rounded shows.
Introducing the greatest tag team on the radio.
Guess what, motherfucker?
Successfully erased.